Okay, I think we're on. Welcome to the live stream for Wednesday. What is today? September 20th, 2017. My name is Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream we do every single Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it goes for about 3 hours. So I wasn't here last week. I missed you guys terribly. I took a little mini vacation, and it's good to be back. It's a little weird to be back. It's amazing the stuff that you forget when you don't do this every week. So we've got lots of people hopping on tonight. We have Tanitria, Angelique, Call Me a Butterfly, Katrina, Richard, Karen, Patania. Hello, hello. Everybody says hello. Welcome, welcome. I feel like I have so much to tell you guys. So much has gone on since I've last talked to you. I need to keep making a running log of everything that's going on. So Lauren says, your hair is so pretty. Thanks, Lauren. I got it colored a few weeks ago. And because, I normally have really dark hair, and I've had really dark hair for many, many years. And I was feeling like Wednesday Addams, like it's the middle of summer and I'm getting my hair dyed like jet black. And finally I'm like, let's just go for something a little bit lighter. So yeah, I like it. It's weird. It's not that much lighter, but it's lighter enough for me that it makes me feel like a totally different person. So I don't know what that says about me and change, since it's only like 3 shades lighter, but it's a big change for me. So let's see what else. And yeah, my vacation was pretty good. I went to Colorado to visit my mom and, family. That's always an interesting time. But, it was good to see her. It was good to be back in Colorado. And, I lived in Fort Collins for about 15, 16 years, and I love it there. Like, it's a really cool town. So always fun to go back. Let's see here. Eileen, welcome, says, hello. It's my first time on a live chat, but I have followed your videos for over a year now. I'm glad to be here. Well, welcome. And we're glad that you're here too. The live streams can go really fast, just kind of a heads up, but they're fun. And I was actually on a live stream for the first time, I don't know, about a month or so ago. It was interesting being a participant on the chat instead of being the one hosting the chat. And it's really fun. Like I liked it. I like chatting with other people, and just the whole experience is just something totally different. So, and for those of you guys that are new for the chat, kind of, I get to as many questions as I can. I have to stop the chat when I'm answering a question because I can't think and see the chat scroll at the same time, because I have the attention span of a fruit fly and it's very distracting for me. So if I don't get to your question, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's most likely because I just didn't see it. So type it in all caps or something, and I'll try to make sure that I see them. Mary Lynn says, what is the topic other than the obvious? Okay, I'm glad you bring this up. Because we don't normally have like a set topic for each live stream. It's just kind of a mix of a little bit of everything. So every live stream is different. It all kind of just revolves around the same topic though. So I've thought about doing specific live streams with specific topics. I kind of don't know how that would go, because everybody, I don't know. I'm open to that if that's something that you guys would want to do. I don't know. Let me know. I don't know. Tommy, welcome, says, question, why does my ex still have our old profile up on Facebook? It's been 6 months and her hoovering was unsuccessful. I pulled her mask off. I called her out on it. And she made a new profile a month ago. So why? Yeah. Okay. Great question. Well, my guess would be to kind of just get under your skin because normal people tend to not do that, right? Especially normal people don't like make a whole fake profile or a brand new profile and then put up a picture of them and their ex. Like, it's one thing if you haven't gotten around to changing your profile picture because you've been together for a long time and like it's awkward and like you don't really know how to tell friends and family that you're no longer together, especially if you're kind of holding on to hope that maybe things will still work out. But yeah, if it's over and she created a whole new profile with the same picture of the both of you, that's my guess would be is it's to just get to you. So if you can give yourself some sanity and some peace of mind, I would encourage you just to block that on Facebook so you don't have to see it. And you might want to just steer clear of social media for a while too, so you're not bothered by it because those little things, they do feel like a little dig like, hey, I'm still here. You have no control over this. I've got a picture of us on the internet. So I get your frustration. It's, one of those things like focusing on kind of like, what do you have control over and trying to just let the rest go because they love a reaction. They love a reaction. Mary Lynn says, I was recently hoovered in person after 2 years, and I am very depressed that I let him in my life. Are you depressed that you fell for the hoover, or are you depressed that you let him in to begin with? I guess that would be my question with that. Chris says, walk me through the silent treatment. I am trying to be indifferent. This is the 4th one in 5 weeks. I am visualizing what I think you mean to say. I'm visualizing past abuse and bad dreams, if I understand the question correctly. Well, Chris, I think for you, you kind of have to figure out what's deal breaker behavior for you in somebody, and kind of what are you looking for in a relationship? Because it's really difficult to have a relationship with somebody who does silent treatment. Even though the person's not talking, it's considered a form of verbal abuse because it's all about teaching somebody. It's what's called a grooming behavior. So it's teaching somebody how to behave. So what it's doing, it's getting you to walk on eggshells. And that's why it's manipulative. It's not cool. So, if this is somebody that you want to try to stay with, I would be very clear with that person and say, hey, I don't do silent treatment. The thing though, is setting a boundary like that is with any boundary, there's the first step, which is being assertive and saying, hey, this isn't okay with me. Like, let's talk about things. And then the second part is actually having some sort of actionable step and being okay with walking away. So it's not easy to do, but the silent treatment is awful. I mean, I've been on this receiving end of that. I think a lot of people here have been on the receiving end of it, where you just feel like a sheet twisting in the wind. You don't know if they're going to reopen contact. You don't know really kind of what's going on, or it's awful. It's awful. Okay. Let's see. Lily says, I want to know if narcissists can snap and have cognitive issues when overwhelmed. I am in Florida. We had significant damage. He sent the wrong insurance info and keeps asking about birthday cards. It makes zero sense. Well, I don't know. You would know him better than me, but it's so difficult. Like if he's normally manipulative, then to me that so much of it just depends on like your past history with him. You know, if that's not something he would normally do, then it's kind of hard to say, but I guess kind of from what I've seen in the support groups and what I've experienced, that kind of stuff falls under the umbrella of like crazy making behavior. It's just kind of this nonsensical behavior. It's designed to frustrate, it's designed to irritate and kind of provoke, knowing that you're in a bad spot. You need the insurance info. You're not concerned about birthday cards. To me, it just seems like it's kind of trying to push your buttons, but you would be the best judge of that. If you can, I would just contact the insurance company directly. If you know, for example, if you know you have State Farm insurance, I would just Google State Farm and call them directly and say, here's my name. I don't have the insurance number, and not try to rely on him, because it sounds, that he could be kind of playing games with you. And, you need to get that stuff resolved. Karen says, I was watching one of your older live streams. You discussed a very interesting topic: levels of problematic behavior, confusion, introspection, anxiety, depression, and death. Yeah, interesting that you bring that up. Interesting timing on that. I started working on another one of my books that's in the pipeline, and I hadn't looked at it in like a year and a half, and I came across that section today. Although in that section I didn't have the anxiety, depression, or death part of that. But yes, all problematic behavior starts with confusion, and especially when you're dealing with a manipulative person, because kind of by definition, manipulation, it's taking something and then turning it into something else. And when something becomes skewed like that, it's confusing because it's designed to be confusing. So confusion is always the first sign of a problem, and it's a major sign that a person's in an abusive relationship, because an abusive relationship is a confusing relationship. It's a relationship where that person's continually being knocked off balance, whether it's silent treatment or stonewalling or them running really hot and cold or bursts of anger or getting yelled at, or seeing these bouts of rage, just kind of very erratic behavior. And so it's confusing because it tends to not line up with what we've experienced with this person in the past. And then because it is confusing, then it leads to introspection, which is kind of where you're kind of wondering, is it me or is it them? Is it me? I mean, is it me? Do I have issues with men or, relationships or commitment, or did I hear that right? Was I stressed? Am I being too sensitive? Is it me or is it them? Or, did they really say that? Did they really mean it that way? Like, this is really weird. And really the next stage after introspection tends to be more of like that, I think, kind of research phase. This is where a person, they start asking people, they start asking coworkers and friends and family and anybody that support groups, anybody that'll listen. They're going to Google, they're researching stuff. They're trying to figure out what they're experiencing, and they're trying to figure out, is it me or is it them? And oftentimes this confusion just keeps getting thicker and thicker. It's like this fog that's setting in, because if a person's already got this bond, like if you're dating somebody and you already like a lot of things about them, and most emotional manipulators tend to be very likable in the beginning. They tend to come on, they're very intense. And that intensity can really be misconstrued for sincerity. And so it can feel intoxicating. So it's hard to walk away from a situation like that, especially if we don't have concrete proof. We just have all of these squirrely things that are kind of all of it, the smoke, right? That's pointing to a fire, but we haven't seen the fire yet. And because we want to stay, if a person wants to stay in whatever situation is going on for whatever reason, but they're experiencing something that's problematic, the only way that we can justify staying is if we can convince ourselves that it's not a problem. So then you're kind of, a person's being manipulated on two different ways, right? You've got this emotional manipulator that's running hot and cold, and maybe they're blaming you and they're telling you that you're too sensitive, you heard wrong, that never happened, you make a big deal out of nothing, you're crazy. They're manipulating you, but then we're also manipulating ourselves because we're slipping in and out of this cognitive dissonance is what it's called, which feels like mental anguish because we're trying to get 1 + 1 to equal 2. Like we're trying to get things to add up, but things don't add up. And so there's a tremendous amount of confusion in these relationships. So yes, confusion, introspection, the kind of this research phase. And then if we continue to stay, it's that increased mental anguish, that anxiety, that which then leads oftentimes to depression. So it's these feelings of, and it's kind of this back and forth. So there's this anxiety of, is it me or is it him and or her? And there's all of this mental anguish going on, which creates anxiety because then a person's walking on eggshells, like Chris was talking about earlier, silent treatment. So then there's these punishments if you don't behave a certain way, but because their behavior is so erratic, there's not enough eggshells to walk on that's going to get them to stop doing what they're doing because their behavior has nothing to do with us to begin with. It's them. They're the problem. So it's their perception of reality, their understanding of relationships. It's them. And, but because when you're in it, we often don't realize that it's them because it feels like us. If you're being told that it's us, then it's really difficult to kind of sort out what's really going on. And so there's all of this anxiety of wanting to try to keep this relationship together, but it's exhausting because there's all these eggshells and you're kind of wondering, when, like I said, when is the next shoe going to drop? That period then leads to depression, especially if there is this hot and cold, this constant anxiety over, are they going to leave? Or am I going to have to try to break up with them? And I don't want to break up with them. So this makes a person feel very depressed. And then down the road, it can lead to death. And that might sound very dramatic, but in many ways, it's true. If their behavior is disempowering and destructive, and those that are becoming physically abusive, where it's dangerous and possibly deadly, these relationships can lead to death. I think it was in the last book that we read for book club, which we're doing not this Thursday, next Thursday, on betrayal bonds. I think it was in that book, and they were talking about the homicide, like the murder rate for women. I don't know if they gave this statistic for men. I don't think that they did in that book, but for women, it's 53% of murders are due to a significant other. So if a person starts showing signs that they're dangerous, they start making threats, I can't live without you. I won't live without you. I love you. What are you doing? You're ruining my life. You're making me do this. I'm going to kill myself. They start talking about death, or they start hinting at what would happen if you're not around. And those are all things to take very, very seriously. Normal people don't joke about suicide. I should say normal, balanced people don't joke about it. They don't threaten it. So it's never funny when somebody talks about suicide or murder. These are the signs that this is what they're thinking about. So I'm a big fan. If anybody's feeling suicidal, or if you have an ex that's threatening suicide, you call 911. You don't get in the middle of that. Get people over there that know how to handle those kinds of things. Don't feel obligated to reopen contact. Definitely don't go over there they need a professional response team, if anything. But so death, so there's that element, that, that possibility of death. And then there's also the possibility of, if a person's in this kind of relationship for a long enough time and they're experiencing enough depression and anxiety, they're continually being told that they're the problem. They're getting ground down. They have no self-esteem. They have, over time, these relationships, they're progressive and they're degenerative. And so meaning they get worse with time. And so over time, a person realizes they feel like a shell of their former selves. They feel like they're 110 years old. They feel ground down. They've lost friends. They've lost family. They're losing hope. They don't think that things are going to get any better. If this person is malicious and sadistic, then they're going to be, pushing them to commit suicide. You're worthless. You'll never do better than me. You're lucky that you even got me. Name calling, pushing, you should just kill yourself, pushing a person, trying to get them to go over the edge. So, and this need, I think, within so many of us, of, we believe if we are thinking that our love can somehow change them, then that it sucks the energy out of a person. It sucks the life force out of a person, because we can't love them better. And not every relationship, communication doesn't solve everything. Sometimes it's a character issue. Sometimes it's like a moral compass issue. Sometimes it's a personality issue, and love doesn't fix that. They need to do the work. Okay, let's see. That's a good point. Lily says, thank you for that reminder. Somebody who doesn't value their own life, may not respect yours either. Yeah. And, these situations could very well end in a murder, suicide. You hear about it all the time on the news. So it's really, don't, an abusive person who's also suicidal, an abusive person doesn't respect you, period. Anyhow, even on a good day. So especially when they're suicidal, they feel like they have nothing to lose. That's that level of narcissism of, I've got nothing left to lose, so I might as well take you out too, because they're so twisted in their thinking that it's like, in their mind, this is all your fault anyhow. But it's not. It's not. Little Miss says, yeah, my ex said he would kill me and bury my body in the desert so nobody could find me. Yeah. Yeah, that's awful. Awful. Incredibly traumatic. That's that kind of stuff, and at the time, if they've been living in that and they're used to that, it may not register as much of a problem as it really is. That stuff's, it's not funny. And even though a person has survived stuff like that in the past with them, I see this a lot in the support groups. I've seen this a lot when I was working at the domestic violence shelter. And this kind of stuff terrifies me so much, because people think, oh no, this is just how we fight. Or, yeah, well, we've gone through stuff like this before. And because they've survived it before, they've linked up of, this is not as dangerous as it is. So it is dangerous. If a person's ever been physically abusive to you, make sure that if you have to see them, to meet with them in a public place, value your safety. Like, you matter. You matter. Don't let them set the tone or the pace, or you really want the rules of contact to be your rules as much as possible, as much as you possibly can. So you can stay in control. Kristen says, what do you do after 25 plus years of a toxic, mentally abusive marriage? And you're realizing that you're bringing some traits you've picked up along the way into your new relationship, but not purposely. So, what you're talking about, there's a term for it, and it's called fleas. It's not a very, uh, you know, nice term, but I think it kind of adequately describes what many of us have experienced. And so the concept is, you lay down with a dog, you get fleas, kind of a thing. So if a person's in any type of kind of toxic or dysfunctional environment for any length of time, they're going to pick up fleas. And fleas are these bad behaviors that we either kind of learn to cope in that situation, or behaviors of the abusive person we've been around. So the good news is that you're aware of them and you're picking up on them. And you're like, wow, this is not who I am. This is not the kind of person I want to be. And these are some of the things that I'm doing. So I guess for starters, I would fully acknowledge that to your new partner and just say, this is the stuff that I'm seeing within me that's really not okay. And it's the stuff that that I'm working on. So it's not okay. And to just own it, to fully own it. So if something does happen and you react in a certain way, to be fully accountable for it and just say, wow, okay, I'm sorry. I don't know where that came from. That's not okay. And, I'm going to really work to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I'm trying to think if there's any good books. The only book that comes to mind that I think might really help for you to spot a lot of these problematic behaviors within yourself a lot easier and a lot sooner is the book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship. It's one of my favorite books. It's so eye-opening. It's by Patricia Evans. And in that, she lists out, I think it's like 16 different forms of verbal abuse. And so, it's like anything else. Like once you know what you're dealing with, once you have a word for it, then that little piece of clarity goes a long way, because then you can start being like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I am being continually critical, or I am being undermining, or I'm doing silent treatment, or what have you. So once you can more easily identify it, then you can work towards changing it. Oh, geez. Katrina says, at the end of my relationship, he told me if all women created healthy boundaries, the men would kill them all. Yikes. Well, he's wrong about that. I think there's a lot of men. I know that, obviously, right? Like there's a ton of men out there that actually do want a healthy relationship with healthy boundaries and healthy communication. So him saying that just really speaks to his, dysfunctional thinking than anything. Jessica says, yeah, my ex told me that if I ever cheated on him, he would kill me. That's when I knew beyond knowing that it was time for me to leave. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. Because that stuff, I've been told that twice by two different guys, and it did not register as the red flag that it should have. But when you know better, then you can do better. And I will never be in a relationship. I will never, ever be in a relationship again where there's threats of any kind, where there's confusing behavior, frankly, of any kind. Like, I just don't have time for it. Either a person has the emotional availability to actually be an adult, or they don't. And they can either have a solutions-oriented conversation, or they can't. So I don't do crazy making. I don't do, and it's one thing, when you're not in it, to say that you're not going to be in it is one thing, but it's so much harder when you're in it. And I get it. So there's no judgment, but I'm at the point in my life where I've gone around this mountain enough times now where I've learned these are the early warning signs, like confusing, controlling, crazy making. Those are the early signs. If you start experiencing that stuff, especially that confusion, if it's not something that can be easily resolved, it's a problem. And if it would be, and to also think about asking if somebody that you loved were to tell you what was going on. Because again, oftentimes we experience confusion when we see a problem, but we wish we didn't, because that confusion is denial, is what that really is. And so giving yourself some emotional distance and asking, okay, if a loved one were to come to me and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, odds are we would see it a lot more clearly, you know? Um, so I would encourage you to take the advice that you would give like a younger sibling or a good friend. And 9 out of 10 times, that's your answer. Okay. Let's see. Tanitria says, yeah, the eggshells kept me stressed out and on high alert. I had panic attacks. I felt like a zombie. Yeah. And, frankly, I bet that there's a lot of people that go to the doctor for depression, for feeling suicidal, that have anxiety, that have a lot of these other types of symptoms, and that they don't, like insomnia, eating disorders, probably even alcoholism and drug addiction, that have all of these other things going on. And they don't realize that what's actually happening is that they're in an abusive relationship. The vast majority of people out there do not realize that they're in an abusive relationship. And in part, it's because of that cognitive dissonance where, it's that ongoing confusion. And then it's wondering, is it them or is it me? And then also a lot of the programming, the ideas that we have about a relationship where people think, oh, well, there's two sides to every story. And, kind of, well, what's your part in it? And there's this thinking that there's two people in a relationship, which is true. But when you're dealing with an emotional manipulator, you're not in a relationship, you're in a manipulationship. So while there's two people in a relationship, it's not the same dynamic in a manipulationship. In a manipulationship, you basically, you have the same dynamic as like a captor and a hostage. Very different dynamic. So the issue isn't communication. The issue is power and control. Very, very different dynamic. Everything is different. But on the outside, it can be hard to tell like what's what, especially when you're in it. Standing Firm says, do they say the opposite of what they mean? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So this tends to go down in two main ways. Either they will warn you about themselves, and this tends to kind of happen early on from what I've seen. So they might say things such as, I hurt everyone I love, or I'm dangerous, or I can't be trusted, or I don't know how to love. If a person's warning you about themselves, take that seriously. Because again, normal, healthy people are not going to tell you something like that. And oftentimes, those of us on the receiving end of it often feel like, oh no, they're this baby bird with a broken wing. It's because of their mother or their ex that they don't know how to love. I'll be there. I'll show them that I am different. I'll save them. And so we want to kind of, we want to be like, I just want to love you. I want to squeeze you and hug you so tight that all your pieces go back together. But it doesn't work that way. So they'll either warn you about themselves or they will say the opposite. They'll say things, and it tends to also be kind of in the first month or so that you're dating them, of I will never hurt you, or I will never lie to you, or I will never cheat on you. And then oftentimes, of course, then they go do the exact opposite. One thing that I have found is, again, normal, decent people don't feel the need to try to prove that to another person. And I think normal people with sincere intentions also don't ever speak in absolutes, because they're not, when we communicate, we're not trying to convince each other of something. If we were sitting together on a train, I would never look over at you and say, I am not going to steal your purse. Like, what? You would hope not, right? Like, that would just kind of be something that would be a weird thing for a person to say. Like, I'm not going to steal your purse. And the fact that they said that they had to say that to you, and the fact that they were trying to convince you that they were not going to steal your purse would normally kind of make you feel confused and think, I better move my purse to the window, right? Like, to the other side of them, because that's a weird thing to say. So it's like when they say something like that, I would never hurt you. The reality is, a normal person realizes, I might hurt you. I might say something that hurts your feelings. I'm probably going to hurt you at some point, because that's kind of the nature of relationships. But my intentions are good, and I will be accountable for my behavior, and I will try to make it right. That's what a normal person does. They don't say, I will, they don't speak in absolutes like that. They don't try to convince other people of what their intentions are, because they realize, like, I can't, to promise something for the whole time you're with somebody, you're not sure. Like, things come up. You might say something hurtful. You don't know. So I'm always very leery of anybody that tries to convince me of their intentions, or that warns me about their behavior. Either one of those for me is a huge red flag. And frankly, it's a deal breaker, because it's weird. And I don't do weird. I don't do confusing anymore. Let me scroll down. Truth Seeker says, I'm so glad I know this reassurance is exactly the opposite now. Yeah. Why say that? Yep. Yeah. Little Miss says, you have to protect yourself with boundaries. You are the gatekeeper. So I'm going to give you guys a little, one of my takeaways from the book club book that we're going to talk about next week. But I just love it so much. And it so applies to what we're talking about with boundaries. Is I love this part in the book. The guy talks about how one of the biggest challenges with a lot of time people that have grown up in like dysfunctional environments or have been in dysfunctional relationships is he says, think about boundaries as a zipper. So with people that have been around a lot of toxic other people, they have the zipper on the outside, like you would have on a jacket. But the reality is the zipper needs to be on the inside. So we have the control to unzip when we want to. But if a person's been around a lot of toxicity for a long time, or they just have never had healthy boundaries modeled for them, which is like probably 95% of us, they had the zipper on the outside. And so what that means is that other people then have the control to unzip. So what this looks like is people with the zipper on the outside, they often reveal too much. They feel obligated to answer questions. They feel obligated to, or they have no problem with somebody else kind of setting the pace of something. And so they don't feel in control, because they don't realize that they can turn that zipper around, and that they can say no, and that they can set the pace of things, and that they don't owe people personal information about themselves, especially right away. That they realize when a person gets that zipper flipped around to where they control it, they realize No, trust is not just blindly given. It's something that's earned. And if I don't have to do something that makes me uncomfortable, I loved that analogy because I thought that really, I mean, for me, it really hit home. And I see it a lot in the support group too. It's like we're all, not only have we all experienced different versions of the same story, but oftentimes many of us are just kind of different versions of the same people. So we all have a very similar challenges with all of this stuff, and boundaries is a big one. And in setting boundaries and saying no and realizing that you control the pace, and getting that zipper flipped on the inside, it takes practice and it's ongoing, but it's so cool. It's so cool. And real quick, while I'm talking about book club, the book after for what is it, October, that we're reading is called Necessary Endings. And I'm about half of the way through it so far. And it's a really, really, really great book. It's about endings that are necessary. It's about ending things that need to end. And it starts off as a book. I actually did a double take. I wasn't sure if I had the right book or not, but it's about, it starts off as kind of almost like a business book, but it's fantastic. And it talks about their seasons in life. And we need to realize that it's part of life for things to end. And I don't know, it's a really great book. I wish, I was talking to a friend earlier today, I wish I had read it 20 years ago. It was a total game changer because I didn't have that mentality for a long time, that I guess I didn't realize that things ended. I just thought, well, no, you stay friends with people forever. You stay in relationships forever. You always try to make things work. Everything can be solved with communication. I didn't realize that was, not only did I realize that was not what other people were not doing, I didn't realize that was even a problem. It took me quite a while to realize that was a problem. So this book really it's just great. It's great. Endings in business, endings in relationships. He uses a wide variety of examples. It's very interesting. Gamer Christina says, I know you're probably not going to like this question, but is there any test out there that someone can give to another person to see if they are a narcissist? No, nothing that's really out there for like a lay person. I mean, there's, different kind of, what would you call, like, psychiatric evaluations, but those would be done by mental health clinicians. It's really difficult to get an accurate diagnosis of like narcissistic personality disorder, which is kind of why I tend to just kind of steer clear around that, because the reality is, I get it's nice to have validation for that kind of stuff, but narcissism is on a spectrum anyhow. And it's not, I struggle with this because I think a lot of times people, myself included at one time, tend to think of narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths and like not being like that they're not like a person, that they're somehow different. Like, it's almost like they're a reverse Scooby-Doo moment, where they pull off the mask and they're like, that's not Steve Smith. Like in Scooby-Doo, they're like, that's not a zombie. And then they pull off the mask and they're like, that's Steve Smith, the banker. And he's like, you kids, if it wasn't for you, I would have gotten away with it. Like the reverse Scooby-Doo moment is where, like people want to pull off this mask and they're like, that's not Steve Smith, the banker. And they pull off the mask and they're like, it's a narcissist or it's a sociopath. And so that, I think people get kind of hung up on that, where they're waiting for this grand reveal that this person is somehow not human. And the reality is everybody's human. There's narcissistic traits and there's sociopathic traits and there's psychopathic traits, but they're still, at the end of the day, they really are still people. So it can be, it can cause a person to kind of go running down a rabbit trail. And not to mention too, the labels change, the diagnostic criteria changes. Lots of these things, and it's not an exact science. You can ask 12 different clinicians and get 12 very different answers. I mean, I went through this with a family member who a therapist had told my family member, it sounds like you're married to a narcissist. And it was like a light went on and she's like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And basically went home and filed papers and was like, I'm done. Like, this makes total sense. I'm done. And he was so upset. He went to two different professionals and had two separate psychiatric evaluations, both of which came back that he did not have narcissistic personality disorder. So there's so many variables at play. And I always get concerned that people are going to get stuck on kind of waiting for that reverse Scooby-Doo moment. Because if they're thinking in their mind, if they're thinking it's so black and white that this person's either not a narcissist, either they are a narcissist or they're normal, then that can get them stuck back in that fog again, where they're thinking, well, I guess if they're not a narcissist, then kind of given enough love or understanding or communication or rehab or religion or therapy, then they can change. And that's not the case. So, but there's like lots of different quizzes and stuff out there. I mean, you could probably Google, narcissism quiz, those kinds of things. But, again, it's on a spectrum. We all have, to a certain degree, there's like a certain degree of narcissism that's considered healthy. And I know you've heard me talk about it, but for other people here that are new, they might not have. And, kind of a healthy degree of narcissism is where a person has that self-esteem to just kind of be like, why not me? Why not now? I can go out in the world. I can achieve my goals. They believe in themselves. And the difference is, like, problematic narcissism is that shift from kind of why not me? Why not now? To, or why not me? Why it's a moving to, yeah, why not me? But then it's at the expense of you. And then further down the spectrum, you kind of have more like the sociopathic behavior. It's, well, their mindset is, yeah, it's all about me. And it's definitely going to be at the expense of you. And it's at the exploitation of you. And then further down the road, it might be, it's all about me at the death of you. So, and really at the end of the day, confusing, controlling, crazy making, like, back that train way up. Like, if you can kind of nip it in the bud there, then, just keeping out anything even remotely toxic. Somebody had made the best comment on one of the live streams a few weeks ago that I think you're going to like. And they had put in the comment, and I don't know if it's a book or if I forget where they came up with it, but it's hilarious. And they said, with toxic behavior and that kind of stuff, it's sort of like having poop in your soup. How much poop in your soup is okay? Well, hopefully no poop, right? We don't want poop in our soup. And to think about it that way, like it's like, how much poison would you like in the glass of water that you're drinking? Like, nope, I don't want any poison in my water. Not 1%, not 50%. It's all going to make you sick. Elbaz says, I never felt more duped in my life, but once I knew what the monster truly was, I knew I would never go back. Yeah. And even though it's incredibly hurtful and painful, I think at the same time, there is a sense of and this takes time, but there is kind of a sense of peace about that where you realize it's them. It's them. We got tangled up in this web of their pathology. It's them. There's not you that there's nothing that you could have said or done or changed to make it any better. And it's going to happen to the next person and the next person and the next person. And unfortunately, but it's not you. That's their pathology. And so then our task, a big part of our healing in this is, because even if a person it doesn't even matter, frankly, what kind of childhood a person has. If you have been in one of these relationships ever, as a child or as an adult, it's very important to examine your boundaries, because I guarantee you they've been eroded. So a lot of people, they're like, Dana, my childhood was really good. And then they're spending all this time searching. They're like, what is it? I don't get the pieces. Like, my childhood wasn't really like that bad. Like, yeah, my parents were divorced, but they got along okay. And I finished high school and I have a good relationship with both of them. And I don't know, like, what am I missing? How did I get tangled up with these people down the road? And kind of how can I make it stop? And I think a lot of the kind of prevailing material, at least that I've read out there about these kinds of relationships, oftentimes talks about people that come from traumatic homes, where they have like addiction, they grew up with addiction, or they grew up with abuse or being molested or these kinds of things in their home. But a lot of people that haven't experienced that have also later on in life, gotten tangled up with abusive and manipulative and toxic people. And it's really, so the point of all that is it's important to examine your boundaries, because I guarantee you that they've been eroded. So to think about which side of your jacket is the zipper on, like it needs to be on the inside, or which side of the tent, if you're camping, which side of the tent is the zipper on? Is it outside or is it inside? It needs to be on the inside. And so you set the pace. So let me just talk a little bit more about that, because I think this is, man, I tell you, if this is one thing I could really, outside of listening to your gut instinct, that if I could really drive home with people, it would be this. And that is, you control the pace of everything. You have that power. You have that ability. So if somebody comes along and you're starting to date again, and there's that intensity right off the bat. They're charming, they're likable, he's handsome or she's beautiful, and it's all of this attention, and there's this whirlwind, and you're finding yourself wanting to get sucked up in it, and you're spending hours upon hours every single day texting this person. You've let all of your friends go, your hobbies go. If you had them to begin with. A lot of people don't even have that, but especially people that have kids and their life is, they work and then they have their kids, but they're very quickly making this new person their whole life. And the whirlwind doesn't feel like a whirlwind. It feels healthy. It feels intoxicating. It feels exhilarating. And the other person is pushing, I want to see you this weekend. And then it's just kind of this rush of rushing intimacy, where you're telling they're calling you pet names on the second date, or even on the first, or even before you even met them. They're calling you hun or babe, or there's this sense that you've known them for a while, this kind of deep connection and this deep attraction. And maybe you're having sex right away, or you're telling them deep personal things about you right away. And when I say right away, I mean within like the first few weeks. Your life is an open book. And then all of a sudden but the whole time you're having this confusion. Something feels off. You're having anxiety again. Maybe you're having nightmares again. You're wondering, is it them? Is it me? do I still have issues? I know I've got PTSD. Is this PTSD or is this somehow problematic? They seem so great. I don't want to miss out on a good thing. So I bet it's just me. And this whirlwind keeps picking up speed. And because they don't want to let this good thing go, they're like, well, I better just dive into that whirlwind and love like I've never been hurt before. And other friends and family are justifying it. They want to see this person happy. And they're like, not everybody's perfect. You've been hurt in the past, but don't let that ruin your future. And they're telling you all this kind of stuff. But if you're finding yourself feeling confusion about this or moving at a pace that you're not okay with, or maybe you are even okay with it and you're having sex on the first or second date and things are going too fast, this is a problem. And these whirlwind situations, like more often than not, they turn into tornadoes and they can really do a number on your life. So please go slow. If something is real, it will still be there 60 days from now. Emotional manipulators do not like to go slow the vast majority of the time. They'll keep doing these boundary pushes that whole time to get the whirlwind back up again. So you keep the zipper on the inside, move at a pace. I was saying move at a pace that you're comfortable with. Let me retract that and say move at a pace that's healthy. Move at a pace that makes sense. This is a total stranger, and it's really difficult to see a person for who they really are right away. It's really hard to see them clearly if you've got emotions involved, which is really why it's helpful to take things slow so you can see things with clearly and not through this rose-colored glasses. Yeah, Zen Storm says, my ex wanted to marry me within a month of dating. Yep. Oftentimes they do, or they'll start hinting at that, and some of this is normal, right? So some of this like kind of intensity and idealization can be normal within a relationship, but mature people realize that this is how you always feel at the beginning of any relationship. You always feel like this person's so amazing and they're so perfect for me. And you get so excited, but you realize when you're an adult that love always feels like kind of those butterflies and that excitement and that energy at first. It's not even love, like the feelings of infatuation always feel like that, but they wear off. And once they wear off, then I read a great quote the other day that you fall in love with personality, but you marry character, or you live with character. And that's so true. And character takes a while to see. And a person's personality, they can come off really charming and say all the right things. And especially if you're throwing sex into the mix and the connection is amazing, and it can be very intoxicating. So it's why it's so important for us to go slow. Zen Storm says, yeah, it's an F4 tornado. Yes, it really can be. Truth Seeker says, I don't think I want any connection further than friendship. You know what? And that's okay too. That's okay too. Yep. Beryl says, I once started dating a narcissist and he said on the second or third date, I'm falling in love. Well, I'm not going to say it. I fell for it and I could never rectify his words with actions. So I dumped him. Yeah. So that kind of stuff, right? Because it's not mature. And that hinting at love, or, I had shared, this was actually the guy that I had only gone on a few dates with. This was 3 or so years ago, 3.5 years ago when I started all this. And that relationship was so, I would say he was a psychopath. His energy was really dark and I couldn't shake it. And I was making myself nuts, wondering, is it me? Is it him? He was handsome. He was charming. He was, on paper, he was the total package, but I couldn't shake that feeling that there was something off. And Um, it was the second or third date, and he had started crying, and he was like, "I just like you so much." But the thing though, it wasn't real tears. It was fake crying. And I've seen that before, with other emotional manipulators I've dated. And so right then I was like, this guy's nuts, and he's telling me everything that he thinks that I want to hear. And I need to get rid of him. But now I need to figure out how to get rid of him and not have him flip out. So yeah. So yeah, going slow and realizing words are so easy. It's so easy to tell a person everything that they want to hear. And this is where it goes down to really using your gut instincts about situations and not needing concrete proof. Don't wait to see flames. If you smell smoke, if you see smoke, that's enough. Like, that's not normal. Yep. Zenstorm says, if you're emotionally or sexually invested, you're mentally compromised. Yeah. And we are. I think that it's kind of this biological driver where, and I think maybe, well, I don't know, possibly more so for women, but it's definitely there for men too. That need to bond, that level of intensity. And, we're not thinking clearly, especially if we've been starved out if we're lonely, or if we've been starved out for like feeling, love or attention or affection. It can be a really good exercise to write down like the past 5 relationships that you've been in. What were you feeling before you met this person? What was going on in your life? Were you new to town? Were you in financial, was there instability at all going on in your life? Were you feeling fearful? Um, what was your support system like? Did you have friends? Did you have hobbies? Were you spending time with other people? And then, so write down what was going on in your life, before you met them. What was it about them that really attracted you to them? Were they charming? Were they very attentive? Did you feel like the most important thing in their life? Did you feel important and loved kind of right off the bat? What was it about them that was so attractive to you? And see if there's patterns there. Because then I think it can help to see, okay, this is what I'm falling for time and time and time again. Because narcissists, they target people because based on supply, like they want to use them for something: attention, validation, status, public image, money, sex, you name it. And they exploit vulnerabilities. And if we can figure out, what our vulnerabilities are that they're continuing to exploit, then we have that awareness, and well, even really having that awareness is huge. It's sort of like, I had a gal I knew, this was, I don't know, a year and a half or so ago. And she has a lot of health conditions. She, is in chronic pain. She's older, and she began online dating. And she had done online dating like 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, online dating was very different. You just didn't have the number of predators out there that you do now. And this time around, and she'd had great luck with online dating before, even long distance online dating. She'd met a guy that lived in California. We live in Michigan, and they had this long distance romance. They would meet up every so often, and it was just this, romance that they had going. So she didn't think it was that strange with all of these men being overseas or not around. And she kept falling for like the love bombing and the promises. And she really kept thinking, this guy is it. We're going to get married. It was just this whirlwind. They would send her, roses or like a little box of chocolates or just kind of enough to bait her in. One guy had her talk to his adult daughter, and who he had said, my daughter wants to know who's this woman that's stolen my heart. And every single one of these men, they were like online dating scammers, you know. And then of course, fast forward 3 or 4 weeks, then they start asking for money. They had an emergency surgery. They got stuck at the airport. Their funds for their business didn't go through, these kinds of things. So, and she kept, and after the first few times I was like, okay, I get it. Like, you're not used to online dating. If you're not on the lookout for scams, you're going to get caught up in them. But it kept happening. And then I realized, and she had this therapist that kept telling her, basically, don't fear love. Like, you've got to just open up. Maybe her therapist wasn't familiar with scams either. And so was giving her a lot of really bad advice. And so I was like, no, this is not legit. Like, these men are not legit. Like 100% of the time, if somebody's asking you for money that you've never met, that are online, like, it's a scam. And, but she was so lonely that she kept falling for it time and time and time and time again. So, it's important. It's important we know what our vulnerabilities are, so they can't be so easily exploited. And then and a lot of it too is just realizing, what manipulative behavior looks like. It's the same thing with online scams. Like, once you realize there's a pattern to this, if they have an accent, if they live overseas, if they are claiming to be in the military or an entrepreneur or an engineer, that they're going to be back in 3 weeks, and then you can have this amazing life together, and they won't Skype with you. And, like, there's things that are not lining up, and they're wanting to email you obsessively all day, every day. And they're telling you everything you want to hear. It's a scam. It's a scam. It's 100% of the time a scam. But until you know that, you're going to get caught up in it. Oh, good. Missouri Cowboy. I'm glad you got that. I got my book club list with links to the notes, with the books, all that. And I posted my book club notes and Lucy's notes on my website, thriveafterabuse.com. So those notes are there under book club notes if you want to read them. My goal with that stuff is to do, for each book, to do like my 7 main takeaways. And then I'll cover them. And I'm kind of thinking too, it might be good to do like the book club discussion, and then maybe like a shorter video where I just run through my 7 takeaways. Cause I realize these videos are really long, and it's quite the time commitment for people. So. Oh, I love that. Tanitria. She says, I don't worry about dating. Most of my life, I took care of everyone. Now I'm going to discover and be good to me. I am dating myself. Yes, I love that. Good for you. And frankly, that's the right order of things, because once you get that down, once you get it down where you are your own best friend, I know that might sound really hokey to a lot of people out there, but it's true. Once you really, you enjoy your own time, and because there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. If you can enjoy being alone, then it's solitude. It's relaxation, or it's fun. You know how to entertain yourself. My mom used to say when we were kids, when we would say, oh, we're bored, she would say, only boring people get bored. And I thought that was so mean at the time, but it's true, So it's like, okay, find a hobby, learn how to entertain yourself, and then you're not bored. And then you actually are totally fine with being alone. And so then when you can get to that place where you're like, I really enjoy my company, then you're not going to want to settle for bad company. because you're like, I have good company. Like I'm good. I'm good being alone. I'm for sure not going to be with bad company because I'm trying to not be alone. So if you can get that piece, the puzzle in place, that's a big one. And really treating yourself with value. And a lot of that comes from a lot of it just really comes to paying attention to how you feel, and getting in tune with your emotions and how does it feel when something's off, and how does it feel when you feel good, or when a situation feels good, or when a friendship feels good, and then how does it feel when it feels not so good? And realizing that those are all signs of this kind of your internal guidance system is really what it is. So there is I really feel like people need to get that in place before they start dating, because if a person doesn't have that in place, then it's a real kind of crapshoot as to what their next relationship is going to be like. Odds are it's probably not going to be good. Let's see. Lauren says, as of now, I love myself more than I ever have in my life. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm better than where I was. Girl, that's it. That is it. And, it's the whole kind of saying of progress, not perfection. I don't know if there really is an end point with all of this. But the good news is, even though I was saying I think these are some fundamentals that a person needs to get in place before they start dating, we don't have to, be this completely, self-actualized person. Getting the fundamentals in place, it really doesn't necessarily take that long. It takes awareness of it and practice of it. And I guess trusting yourself to know that you are going to keep yourself safe. Like you're going to walk away. It's okay. It's okay to walk away from problematic situations. Like you don't have to wait for their behavior to get so bad that they prove you right, that they prove your gut instinct right. Like don't wait. Confusing, controlling, crazy making, those are reasons enough. Frankly, even if something's just not good enough, is still reason enough to walk away. Oh, good. Gamer Christina says, I love how long your videos are. Thank you so much for all your help. Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad. I don't know. I have there's a few people that I listen to for various topics on YouTube. Like I listen to a writing podcast, and she has a writing YouTube channel too. Joanna Penn is her name, the creative pen, if you're a writer. And I love her. I love her personality and I love her accent. And so she's just delightful to listen to. And so she interviews writers, and it's, I'd enjoy it. I like listening to what other people, their experiences and their learning curve and all of that. It's interesting, but yeah. But I get it though. A lot of people, these videos are long. It's a lot. The plan has been to get them like cut up and made into shorter videos. But I will tell you, the biggest challenge for me doing that is I really have a hard time with watching myself on video. That's what's the holdup. And that's what's been the holdup for me making new videos outside of the live streams. I do the live streams because I enjoy doing them, but I've committed to doing them. And the shorter videos, I guess I feel like I can, because I haven't committed to doing them, that I can get away with not doing them. I don't know. Weird self-esteem stuff I need to work through. But on the positive side, with the podcasts, I realized this the other day, I've gotten to the point where I am so much better with listening to my voice on the podcast. And even though it's the same stuff that's on YouTube, it's weird. So that was very promising to me, that I turned a corner with the podcasts, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. And now, and maybe it's because of the frequency, because I put out 3 podcasts a week. So I'm used to like listening to myself more, whereas I did the live streams only once a week. I don't know. Weird. There's so much like emotional stuff that goes on behind the scenes with all of this that most people probably wouldn't guess. Bonnie says, I feel lonely in my marriage to my toxic husband. I can imagine, Bonnie, and I'm so sorry that you feel that way. It is. I think there's nothing more lonely in the world than being married to a person that you just don't have that connection with. Narcissist or not. I mean, it's very lonely. I get it. Let's see. Oh, Missouri Cowboy. Thank you so much for the live stream donation. He says, thank you all for being here. I cannot heal alone. I need all of you. Thank you all. That was really sweet of you. I agree. The power is in the community. It's getting that validation and clarity from other people is just tremendous. Jamie says, oh wait, they're in the middle of a conversation. Isn't it normal for adults to crave affection or touch or hugs from someone? If it's not normal, I'm screwed. It is normal. It is normal. I mean, humans are, I think, mostly social creatures, but it's getting those needs met in a healthy way. A lot of people, if they're not dating, some healthy ways would be getting hugs from friends, or animals are hugely therapeutic. Getting a massage, if you're not comfortable, some people, depending on what they've gone through, I've had some bad experiences with some massage therapists. So I prefer, there's a place I go to that's in the mall. Like the atmosphere is terrible, but it's, you keep your clothes on, and it's out in public, and I'm like, okay, I'm all about this. So for me, that's a much more comfortable way of getting a massage. So I guess it's kind of knowing yourself and what ways can you get touch that's in a healthy way that feels good to you, that's still treating yourself with dignity and respect. Because, a lot of people, what I see is, and I get it, is they're feeling, especially if they're in a relationship with more of like that overt narcissist, where it's all about them. And they're so starved out for somebody to just, for kindness and compassion and caring. And, and again, they often confuse that intensity and that charm if they come across one of like a more covert narcissist, where they confuse that and then they get tangled up with them, or they start having, sleeping around kind of a thing, because they just they're craving that human touch. So, and Lauren says, it makes me sad that it's going to take me a while to leave, but I know it'll be worth it. Yeah. And some people, it does take a while to develop a plan and do all that. And one of the biggest pieces of the plan, I would encourage for you to have this be one of the biggest pieces of the plan, is not only safety, but also thinking about, okay, how are you going to fill this void that this person has left? And using the powers of anticipation of what can you do. So when they're not there, even if you're like, please, like I am so ready to be done with this. A lot of people are caught off guard. I saw this at the domestic violence shelter too, where they were like, oh my gosh, he was so awful, or she was so awful, but now I'm alone and I feel so empty inside, because they have no friends, they have no hobbies, they're not close to their family for whatever reason. And they really struggle with that profound feeling of emptiness, especially when you go from something that's really intense to just nothing. So if you can try to prepare for that, I'm a big fan of, so something you could do right now, if this resonates with you, is the website meetup.com is fantastic. If you could start, if you need to, if you want to, uh, joining different groups, interacting with people, going to different meetup. They have all kinds of meetup. They have Tai Chi in the park and, Reiki and, um, you know, I don't book clubs and Chinese cooking and, just all kinds of meetups. Most places do anyways. And that can be a great way to kind of rebuild a support network. So if and when you do leave, then you're not going from, like 100 miles an hour with that intensity to zero. So, okay. New Chris, thank you for the live stream donation. Says, it's about time I sent some shrapnel too. This has been a great help. I look forward to my Wednesday night shift in the UK. Thanks, Dana, for all. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, all. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it's good to have you here. And it's so cool to have people from all over the world. I just get the biggest kick out of that. It never gets old. So cool. Okay, let me scroll down here. Beryl is talking about crying in public and says, I have cried in public a lot. It happens and people give you space. Yeah, I'll share a story with you. When I was, oh, gosh, I think it might have been, was it shortly? I think it was shortly after Jack. It was either right after my divorce or it was after one major relationship. I think it might have been after Jack. And I had gone to the grocery store and the cashier, had said, how are you doing today? And I couldn't even muster up the energy to lie and say fine. And I just started sobbing in line at the grocery store. And it was one of the lowest points. It was so awful. And just, that was a big wake up call for me, realizing like I'm a lot more fragile than I realized right now. Interestingly enough, I don't know, I've talked about this in another video. Fast forward a couple years from that event, there was a big fire where I lived in New Mexico, and I was in that same grocery store and this is a small town, same cashier, same line, several years later. And the woman behind me her house was one of the many homes in the fire that had been destroyed. But I didn't know this. The cashier didn't know this. And she'd asked the woman, so as I've already paid, I'm gathering up my bags. She is checking the woman out and she says, hey, how are you doing today? And the gal started crying. And it was just that moment of, oh my God, like, I've been there. And it was so surreal kind of being on the other side of that and seeing somebody else go through it. And, just like, and I don't remember, I'm sure that I must have said something to her like, do you need a hug or can I give you a hug or something? But it was just kind of this moment of everything going full circle where you just realize, man, a lot of everybody's going through something, and it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to cry in line as you're checking out of your groceries or in a movie or anywhere else. It happens. And just so you know too, crying and this kind of stuff, it's just a sign that you're going through a lot and it's okay. And I encourage people to not get upset with yourself about it. This isn't a sign of weakness. It doesn't need to be something embarrassing. It's a sign. It's a sign that there's stuff that's going on with you. And I would encourage you, do what you would with a child or with your best friend who's gone through this. If you had a child who had lost, had gone through some sort of tremendous experience and they were feeling traumatized and they were crying and they were having a hard time, you wouldn't be mean to them. You wouldn't get upset with them. You wouldn't tell them to not feel embarrassed or tell them to feel embarrassed. You wouldn't shame them. You'd probably want to go home and just say, you know what, let's make your favorite meal. We're going to watch, Monsters Inc. We're just going to hunker down and we're just going to take care of ourselves. It's okay. Like, you've been through a lot and we're just going to hunker down and do some stuff that you want to do right now. And doing that for yourself. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be good to yourself. It's important to be good to yourself. Missouri Cowboy says, okay, I'm laughing now. He says, I broke into tears in the local feed store in a redneck hillbilly Ozark mountain town this week. Yeah. And and that's okay too. My guess is like the secret world of cashiers, I bet they see this all the time. So it's okay. It happens. Part of being human. Salon says, as an empath, I have cried many times when others would not in the same situation. Oh, I hear you. I hear you on that. It's tough. It's tough having kind of that high empathy drive and really relating to so many things and to people and having a hard time with that. So this book, the book club book that I'm reading for next month, the Necessary Endings book, part of it, he talks about, he uses the analogy of, things, situations, our life, I guess, our life in general is like a rose bush. And it's our goal, it's our job as the gardener to prune back the rose bush so we can grow the kind of roses, prize-winning roses. We can grow prize-winning roses. And as he was talking about it, he's like, you're going to prune back the branches that are dead or dying. You're going to prune back the ones that are sick and not getting better. You're going to prune back the ones that simply are just unwanted because they don't fit in with the roses that you're trying to grow. And the whole time I was kind of reading this, I kept thinking like, man, I have a hard time emotionally, and this is going to sound really wild, even trimming back like rose bushes, even though it's a plant. And even though I know that it's necessary for the plant to survive, I have a hard time with it. I have a hard time pulling weeds. And I thought, how interesting is that I have a hard time with pulling, like ending a plant's life. I know how silly that sounds, but I have a hard time with pulling weeds, or even I do it, but I don't like it. I have a hard time with that. And it's plants. I have a really hard time with it when it's people. And I don't know, to me, I would be curious if other empaths feel that way. Or if it's just me. So. Elise, oh, that's interesting. Says, a strong belief I used to have is that if you get too close to anyone, they will start treating you badly because you know each other well and nobody's watching. Yeah, it shouldn't be like that. I kind of had a similar belief when I was in college, where I thought, I didn't want to live with anybody. I'd had bad experiences with roommates. I lived with a couple friends over the years, and that tends to not end well. But I had a thing where I'm like, I don't want to live with anybody that's my same height or build, because I don't want it to end badly. Like, I don't want things to get too comfortable, and then they start borrowing my stuff, and then resentment builds up. And um, I guess I thought it was more of like the situation that was the problem. But then the reality, like knowing what I know now, it was more of like my boundaries were the problem. And had I nipped a lot of that in the bud to begin with and just said, like, hey, let's not like borrow each other's stuff, then it wouldn't have gone to that point. Because the reality is, like, people who do respect your boundaries and people who are the right people for you, closeness isn't a scary thing. It's a nice thing. It's a comfortable thing. Okay, good. Salon. I'm not the only one. Says, oh my God, Dana. I felt bad for walking in the grass and I don't like pulling out flowers. I am the same way. The same way. Yes, I hear you. Parking on the grass, when people do that. So like in New Mexico, people don't do that because there's no grass there. And if you did do that, that would be grounds for like a fist fight to break out. Like, grass is precious in the desert. So in Michigan, people park on the grass and all kinds of stuff. And it gives me all of this anxiety. And I'm the same way. Like, I have a hard time. I don't like cut flowers for that reason. It makes me sad. Flowers, I'm getting better about flowers from a garden because I realize that they do need to be pruned back, but I still have a hard time with it. So I hear you. Let's see. Oh gosh. Yeah. Let me scroll up here. Lizard says, why do they play that game? Is it common for them to say, I want to be happy? Generally, my experience has been when a manipulator says, I want to be happy, it generally means that they want to do whatever they want to do and they don't want to have consequences for it. And it generally means they're already doing what they want to do and they don't want to have consequences for it. And so now they're giving some sort of platitude to kind of half blame you. I don't know. It's crazy making. Okay, let's see. Alex says, yeah, cashiers have seen some stuff. Haha. Rick says, yeah, I don't even know how to be good to myself anymore. It takes time. These relationships, it's like being in a rock tumbler. I mean, it really is. And they're so disorienting. And when a person gets out of them, especially if a person got into these when they were young and they spent a lot of time in there and they get out of it and they're like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know. I don't trust myself. I don't know how I feel about things. I don't know. Like, they really feel like they have no identity. And that's very, very common. And that can be incredibly overwhelming. But I would encourage you, it can be incredibly exciting too. So if you can think about living your life in chapters, like your life is a book, okay? And you're the author of that book. And you get to decide when a new chapter starts and when a chapter ends. And you also get to decide how long each chapter is going to be. And so now that you're moving into this different chapter in your life, you get to decide, what is this chapter going to be full of? What's it going to include? And what is it not going to include? You know? So you don't have to have all of the answers today, but you can decide. And I think it helps to kind of break it up and think of it in terms of chapters. If you can think about it like, okay, I really feel like this next chapter, I could see myself like really wanting to get into like riding dirt bikes. I used to do that when I was a kid. I really enjoy it. That's the last thing I really remember that I liked doing, taking that up. Or, you know what? I really enjoy drawing anime stuff. And I think I'm going to kind of take that up again and see, and paying attention to how do you feel? So one of the exercises I encourage people to do, this might sound really strange, so bear with me, is to think about things on an emotional scale of 0 to 10. 10 being you are so juiced, you're excited. It's that feeling of like a Christmas morning kind of a feeling, like you can't wait to get out of bed. Or it's that feeling, for me, I think for a lot of people that like fishing, for example, they're up at 3:30 in the morning and they are excited and they are headed out the door. It's that kind of a feeling. For me, what juices me is if I get to go camping. Like I am so excited the night before. I'm like a little kid. So thinking about what really juices you, that's your 10. And then what's your 5? Is it kind of lukewarm where you're like, meh, eh, you know? And what's your 0? What are you ice cold about that just doesn't excite you at all? Like a Monday morning meeting, right? So something that just really does not get your engines going. So you come up with your own scale. And here's where it's going to sound kind of weird. So bear with me. Start going through your house and taking objects that you're not emotionally invested in. So you can start with, for me, okay, here's a pen. I really like these pens a lot. Like these would be like an 8 or a 9 for me. I really like writing with an ink pen like this. I don't like writing with a ballpoint pen. They actually it's weird. They give me a lot of anxiety. It's like nails on a chalkboard for me. Like writing with the ballpoint pen is maybe like a 2 for me. Okay. So, and it's obviously not an exact science, but so like here, this lip gloss. I love this lip gloss. It's minty. It tastes good. Overall, it's like a 7. This phone case, I kind of like it. It's magnetic. It's really handy. It has a matching wallet that goes with it. I think it's cute. I like it. It's like an 8. Once you kind of get this down where you're getting in tune with how things feel, then it can help kind of remind you and make you more comfortable with how things feel with people and with friendships and with like your work environment, and bringing it to your attention. It sounds weird, but it can be very insightful of like, what number would you assign to this and why is a big thing. Okay, Walter, thank you for the donation. And he asks a fantastic question. He says, Dana, gray rock seems to be a passive approach to me, and boundaries seem to be an active approach. Which is better when you are with a narcissist, gray rock or setting boundaries? That is a fantastic question. I don't think I've ever really been asked that before. I really like that question. I would say it's, you know them best. So it depends. If you have a narcissist in your life who is not, like they're not going to respect my boundaries. It's going to be like screaming into the wind. And their whole goal is to provoke me and to try to bait me into arguing. And they're just exhausting. And if you have to have communication with them, right? Like, let's say it's your son's wife who's the problem, or if it's your boss, or, whoever, your wife, I don't know, whoever, and you have to have contact with them, then it's kind of whatever strategy you think might work. But where a lot of people get caught up is thinking, okay, if I can just get through to them, if I can just get through to them, get them to see that what they're doing is a problem. We can work on communication. I can work on setting boundaries. Boundaries only really work if you're dealing with a person who's going to be respectful of your boundaries. So, continuing to draw that line in the sand and then them continuing to cross it can be exhausting. So it's kind of knowing what battles to pick. And because often, like, it just depends. It depends on what kind of person you have in your life. Like, I have a person that comes to mind that I was friends with, and he was a total crazy maker. And I finally had to just cut him out of my life. It took me decades to realize that, like, what was going on, because our conversations would be great. And I really enjoyed his company and everything was so fantastic. We got along famously, but then things would just take a left turn out of seemingly nowhere. And I would leave the conversations feeling frustrated, and I was rehashing things, and I was trying to figure out how I could be more clear about that. And I was angry. I'm like, man, I couldn't at the time pinpoint why I was feeling that way. But then the more I learned about, like, manipulative behavior, the more it all made sense. And then I realized, oh, he was doing this intentionally. Like, he was trying to upset me. It's all of these little power play type things. And so, like, once I saw it for what it was, then I realized I've got to just go gray rock and then distance myself as much as possible. So, but it's up to you in the situation. Like, only you know the situation best, That would be my 2 cents. I hope that helps. The survivalist says, question, do women eat lip gloss? No, but we do. Well, I guess we kind of do, actually. Yeah, because you're always doing that with it. So I guess in a way you are eating it, even though you don't really intend to. But we do go through it. I think it's a weakness for most every woman I know out there. It's my Achilles heel. Probably one of my number one expenses is lip balm. Okay, let me see. Let me scroll up. Oh, I like that. New Chris says, here's what's working for me at 5 months. Balancing investigation between pathology, stuff about narcissists, and improvement, codependency recovery, motivation videos like Tony Robbins, etc. I think that sounds like a good balance. I like it. Very easy and understandable that people get caught up in that investigation phase. I mean, if a person's been confused for a long time and they're like, I know what I experienced is way outside the realm of normal, I feel emotionally blown apart, like I don't know what's going on, then it's very common for them to try to make sense out of what they experienced. And it's also very common for a person to really immerse themselves in that for like 6 months to a year. But it is important. It really is important to examine boundaries. Because like I was saying, even if most people, myself included, I think do not realize that they have boundary issues. And for a couple different reasons. A lot of times, like oftentimes hear, it's like, well, even like I was saying earlier, it's not necessarily you, it's their pathology that we stepped in. But at the same time, this doesn't mean that we don't have stuff to work on. Because even, let's just say best case scenario, we were a totally self-actualized person with healthy boundaries and stuff before. After these relationships, I guarantee you that stuff is scrambled, because with the person that's psychologically abusive, when they're doing something that's problematic and then they're telling you that it's not, that's going to mess with the person's internal compass for what's a problem and what's not. So it's important that a person kind of get a solid footing and learn to trust in themselves again and their perceptions of the situation. Because again, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll heal enough from this relationship to the point where they can function, where they're not crying in line at the cashier, right? And they think that means that they're healed. And so then when they start going out and dating, they're dating again. And if they start experiencing something confusing, then they just become a wreck. And they're like, I don't know, is it me? Is it him or them or her? Like, who's got the problem? And is it me? Is it my PTSD? Or is this, and they just become like really lost in confusion and in that cognitive dissonance. And so, and what they do is then they start turning towards friends and family and even people in the support group to get validation and clarity about what they're experiencing. And it's so easy to get well-intended bad advice. It's so many people want to see you happy, and they'll tell you things like, and then they're going to give you advice based on their own experiences and their own baseline for what's normal. And what's normal is not the same thing as what's healthy. So they might be like, yeah, totally, no problem. You met this guy and he, lives in Nigeria and he says that he wants to marry you and he's going to be here next week. Why not? You never know. And they're going to justify it. And, it's so, don't go based off of what other people are telling you. Like, it really, you've got to be able to trust yourself. And when in doubt, err on the side of caution. And so once you can get that restored to where you might still question situations. I still question situations. But I know now that this is a warning sign from me. If I start experiencing confusion and I'm like, is it me? Is it her? Or is it him? Like, what's going on? I don't feel that way around most people. I for sure don't feel that way around people that have sincere, good intentions towards me. So that's a big sign for me to back things up a little bit and, to ask myself, to get grounded, to ask myself, what would my brother think about this if he were here? Give myself that emotional distance. Would he think it's a problem? Odds are he would, because he's a healthy, level-headed, I trust his judgment. Like, he's got good judgment. So if he were to think it's a problem, odds are it's a problem. So I'm going to, back things up a little bit. So I guess the point is, if a person does get back out there and they start dating again, and I see a lot of people too, where they're like, I don't trust other people. I'm scared of getting hurt. I just don't trust them. Once you realize, like we talked about earlier, you can flip that zipper back on the inside, then you're in control. You decide when trust is earned. You decide how much of yourself you reveal. That's all in your court. And once you realize that you can trust yourself to keep yourself safe, and that if a situation is problematic at all, that you will leave, then it's going to make those feelings of trusting other people a lot easier, because you're not relying on them to keep you safe. Like, you're not relying on them to have good intentions and to be a nice, normal, decent human being. Like, they're going to be who they're going to be. And that's okay. And you're going to be able to respond accordingly. And that's okay. So you're not putting all your feelings, you're not giving them all that power of controlling your feelings, because you're going to walk away from something that doesn't feel right for you. Thank you, Nathan, for the live stream donation. Much appreciated. Oh gosh, Nathan says, Dana, please timestamp the gray rock answer. That was spot on. Instructions for the unsure abused. Let's see, where are we now? If somebody is watching this video, this might be a lot faster. Please put a timestamp to that down below for Nathan. And I will see once I go. I don't normally rewatch the live streams unless I'm cutting them up to do podcasts. But if I come across it, if somebody doesn't beat me to it, it'll be in the comments down below. Let's see. Salon, yes, Salon. Mike says, my gut instinct gets blared at and silenced by the PTSD inner critic a lot of the time right now. Totally normal. Totally normal. I think a lot of people, again, myself included, tend to feel like they have mashed potatoes for brains. And they doubt their judgment. They realize that they're not thinking clearly. They realize, like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't seem to focus. My decision-making is scrambled. Like, I feel like something's off. You know, I'd mentioned this before in other videos. I used to talk all the time where I'm like, I used to tell people, like, I feel like I'm a hot mess. Like, I'm a mess. And please just go away. Like, I just didn't trust my judgment at all. I mean, it was so off. And that was actually, it was around that time that a friend of mine, I still have it. I don't think I have it here. I have it somewhere. My friend gave me this flip book with quotes. It's like little, like inspirational kind of quotes things. And one of the quotes was from Joseph Campbell, and it said, "Follow your bliss." And I remember looking at that quote and feeling stuck and confused by it, because I'm like, well, I did follow my bliss and I think it almost got me killed. So now what? Like, that's not a good strategy. And that actually really bothered me. It was sort of so much of this stuff. It's like pulling a string on a sweater, it's those little blips of insight that we get where we're like, well, then what does that mean? So I did a lot of thinking about that back then, because that really bothered me. I always thought follow your bliss was a really good thing to do, but I ended up dating a sociopath because of it and missed a lot of the signs. Then I realized, and you've heard me talk about this before, following your bliss can never come at the expense of following your peace. So if you don't have peace about a situation, if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling uncertain, if you're feeling like something's off, because at the time, don't move forward if you don't have peace, because something can feel blissful. A person can feel like your soulmate. This can feel like the best business deal ever. This house could seem like a really great value. But if generally, when we feel bliss about a person or a situation, it's generally because it's meeting some sort of long unmet need within us. And a great way to check that is think about how you feel when you follow your bliss in other areas. Like I used the example earlier, some people that are really into fishing, they're like, man, this makes me feel blissful. For me, it's just going camping, right? So I'm like, man, I feel bliss when I get to go camping. I love everything about it. I love a cold beer. I love a bonfire. I love a tent. I love being out in the woods. I ideally on a lake. Like that does not get any better for me than that. Couple good friends, a comfortable camp chair. I guess it does get better. A comfortable camp chair. Like that's it. That's it for me. Give me that over a 5-star hotel any day of the week. And so knowing that, okay, like I can say that, I can talk about that bliss, but I have total peace about it. Like there is no hesitation, there is no reservation. So do a gut check with yourself. So don't follow your peace, don't follow your bliss if it's at the expense of not following your peace. When in doubt, always follow your peace. Always go with your gut. Go with what gives you peace. That's the first step. And it'll take a little while to kind of get that, your sea legs with all of that again. Benjamin says, yeah, mashed potatoes for brains is an accurate analogy. Yeah. Yeah, it's that anxiety and just the stress of it all, I think. Holly says, Dana, I grew up in severe narcissistic abuse. Though I graduated with top honors, I take menial jobs because I was made to feel inadequate and unworthy. At my age, it's embarrassing. How does one escape this? That's a great question. And I think it's going to start, I think the answer, frankly, to all of this is, and the big lesson in all of this is learning what it means to live an authentic life. So really getting clear for you, what does that mean? What does that look like? What would be, and this might be something that you spend some time on with journaling. And I would go back to what I was saying earlier, getting clear. If you're kind of at the stage where you're like, you know what, I don't fully know everything I've ever been told. Everything I've ever wanted or thought was cool, I've been told that was bad or wrong. So you might have to back way up and start with kind of that emotional scale I was talking about earlier, from 0 to 5 to 10, with how are you feeling about different things? What do you enjoy? You know, what do you, and here's the thing, sometimes if you can get the clarity on what you don't enjoy, the benefit of that is contrast. So if you know what you don't want, then kind of by default, you know what you do want. So that can be a way to do it too. So if you're thinking about jobs and you're like, well, I don't really know what I want to do, but I know what I don't want to do. Like, I know that I don't want to do math. I don't want to sit inside all day. I don't want to work late at night. I don't want to work in a city. So start making a list. Maybe even take a piece of paper, something like this, and make 2 columns, putting down on one side, like, what do you want? And then on the other side, what don't you want? And start to hone in on kind of what you want in this next chapter of your life. And then to start taking steps to bring that in, making that happen. Okay, Rick says, Dana, how do you learn to trust yourself again and turn the mashed potato brain back on? That's a great question. Okay, so I think there's a couple steps to that. And I think first off, realizing that a lot of this is going to just take some time. So being as kind of compassionate with yourself as possible, because it's not, this is going to sound weird. It's not you, it's your brain. So it's sort of like which we all think is like one and the same, but it's really not. Like, there's so much more to our brain that's not the logic and critical thinking part of our brain that is driving what's going on behind the scenes. It's sort of like if a person gets in a car accident, they're going to need to do some physical therapy, right? So it's reasonable to expect that it might take, 12 weeks or, even 6 months before a person can have that full range of mobility back after a car accident. If we've had an emotional car accident, it's going to take some kind of this emotional physical therapy and rehabilitation in order to get you back. Ideally, not necessarily back to where you were, but even better than before. That's something that maybe we should spend some more time talking about at some point. But there's a concept out there called positive psychology, and that's really at the core of it. Whereas traditional psychology, it's more of the belief of a person is damaged by something. They're seen as a patient. And so then they go into a therapist or a mental health clinician's office, and then the goal is to get them back to their baseline. Well, that's, what if your baseline is not very high to begin with? Then what? So it kind of has this built-in, issues with traditional psychology. But positive psychology takes it one step further. And it's like, okay, no matter what you go through, let's figure out kind of where you were. And then let's just shoot for the moon and go way beyond that. Because the reality is, the cool thing with trauma is always transformative. But, and that's a big but, is it can go either way. It can either really destroy a person permanently, or that energy, if a person can harness it and like transmute it and use it as like rocket fuel, that pain of that trauma can really catapult them to the next level. And that's where a lot of like the work of this kind of quote unquote like emotional physical therapy comes into play, is in transmuting all of this pain into rocket fuel and making it work for you instead of letting it sink you. But it's very normal for a person to feel like this is sinking me, because it's intense. It's intense. And there's many times a person will get to the point where they're feeling at this crossroads of, I don't know what will happen to me. I don't know if I'm going to have a breakdown, a breakthrough, or if I'm just going to simply break. Like, I don't know. And that can be a very scary place to be. So I would encourage you to make the decision right now that you're going to use this for your highest and greatest good, and that you're going to transmute all of this pain and anger and rage and sadness and all of this, and you're going to turn it into rocket fuel, and you're going to make this work for your highest and greatest good. Even if you don't have all the answers with how that's going to happen right now, set the destination. It's like the Bible says, one of my favorite passages is, where there is no vision, people perish. And it's so true. Like, set a vision of where you want to go. And your brain, the cool thing is your brain's going to start working overtime with like figuring out ways to make that happen. Our brain loves it. Our brain loves a good problem. It's like a dog chewing a bone. It'll work on it when you're not even looking. So set a vision for a compelling, optimistic vision of yourself, for your life. And, you'll start moving in that direction. So back to the how you trust yourself again. That takes practice. And I encourage people, and it takes time. So I would encourage people to practice this skill and practice it in a way that's where you don't have that large emotional investment. Because like we talked about earlier, it's really difficult to jump right back into dating again. If that's where you were hurt before, it's really a difficult way to go about to see if you've learned all the lessons. I would strongly encourage you, start with friendships. Meetup.com is like my favorite website for this. There's tons of groups out there. It's not a dating site. It's free. A lot of the meetups are low cost. It can be a great way to just get out and meet different people. It's a good way to do it and kind of see, paying attention. How do you feel around different people in the meetup? And maybe kind of journaling about some of this. Or if you're not into journaling so much, you can do the voice memo on your phone if you have that, and just talk out loud. Doing a talking journal in general can be really, really therapeutic, especially if you're not a big journaler. You can do that on the way to work. You can do that before you go to bed at night, kind of what have you. And getting clear on your feelings. Like how does it feel when you're around somebody that's problematic, or even somebody that's just kind of not your people? How does that feel? Does it feel tense? Does it feel awkward? Does it feel kind of, do you feel stifled? How does it feel when you're with your people? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel more at ease? Do you feel like you can be yourself? If they're not your people, you probably feel like you're walking on eggshells a little bit. With dating, I think a lot of it's getting clear on kind of what are deal breakers for you. And I would encourage you to write that down. This is what you're looking for. These are some deal breaker qualities, and these are some deal maker qualities. So, maybe deal breaker qualities, for me, I think kind of a good rule of thumb is mine are, if it involves abuse, addiction, adultery, like active addiction, adultery, or a really rotten attitude. Those are all deal breakers. So I think that can be kind of a good place to start. But then this is where it kind of comes down to like fine tuning it for you. So then outside of that, what are some other deal breakers? And getting as clear as you possibly can about that. And then realizing that you have the power. The zipper's on the inside. You get to decide how fast or slow things go, how much you reveal about yourself, how close you get to another person, and in what time frame. And that you are going from here on out. If a situation is confusing, crazy making, like perpetually confusing, like normal relationships have some degree of confusion, right? But that can be resolved in a short amount of time. It's not perpetual. Like there is no mental anguish. There is no, crazy making. There is no controlling kind of stuff. So if you start experiencing that okay, I value myself enough to leave a situation like this. And then it's going to be practice. And practice, if you realize too, your pattern is that you tend to get caught up in that whirlwind and want to move really, really quick, then to do something different next time, to go slow. So, really first date is, I'm a big fan of meeting for coffee. Keep it light, keep it simple, especially if it's online dating. Meet for coffee. You never know if it's an old picture. You don't know if it's even them. You might get a weird vibe. Like there might just not be any chemistry at all. They could be absolutely stunningly beautiful and even have a great personality, and there's just not enough chemistry there. So, it's about respecting your time and your emotions. So not spending all this time texting the person before you get to meet them. A few texts back and forth. Is there some chemistry? You talk on the phone. Is there still some chemistry enough that you want to meet them? Okay. You want to meet them. You're going out for coffee. Even if there's somebody you work with and you're like, well, but I know them. It's different. So if you're going to go on a date with them or something, meet for coffee, keep it at about, 45 minutes, keep it light, conversation short, and then make a date for later on that week. Maybe then you do dinner, right? And then you slowly amp up, but really using that restraint to be like, okay, I'm not going to make this person my whole world. Like, I'm going to keep my hobbies. I'm going to keep my friendships going. I'm going to keep my life. This person's the candle on the cake. They're not the whole cake. So that's a big thing. That's a great question. Missouri Cowboy says, I'm still afraid of chemistry. When will it be okay to hang around someone in the presence of someone who switches that chemistry switch? I says, okay, I've always been trapped by chemistry. Yeah. Well, I think the great equalizer to that is trusting yourself enough that you're going to walk away from it. So in this book that we're talking about next week, the betrayal bonds, I try to read ahead and then everything gets blurry, but I think it's that book, the betrayal bonds. They talk about how trappers trap monkeys, and what they do. This does have a point. Bear with me. What they do is they put a piece of fruit in the cage, and the monkey reaches in, seeing the fruit, grabs onto it, and it can't get the piece. They can't get the banana out of the cage, right? Because the bars are only narrow enough for its hand. And so the trappers come and they pick up both the monkey and the cage, because the monkey will not put that fruit down, even though he's now getting carried away. And the book makes the comparison to toxic people and how they'll have kind of this seduction story, that they will appear to be that piece of fruit, right? That delicious, I don't know, guava, right? Or this amazing kiwi that we want so bad. And if we're the monkey and we hold on to it, once you realize that, okay, I can't get my hand back out, like something's wrong here, we've got to be able to let go of the fruit and see that it's a trap. Like, it's not real. We're not going to get the piece of fruit. We're never going to get to eat it. This is not what it seems to be. To not get caught up in the seduction story, and to realize that even though you got caught up in that before, now that you realize that chemistry is great, but only if it's real. And to not be the monkey with the piece of fruit, that you can see it for what it is now, and you can let the fruit go and realize there's nothing here. There's nothing here for me. And then you can walk away. So I think a lot of it's just changing your mindset and realizing that you are in control, even though you might not have ever felt in control before. You really, really are. Little Miss says, the fruit is not worth it. It's true. Oh, Steffi, thank you. She says, hi, Dana. You've been my bestie for 2 years. Just now communicating. Thank you for what you do. We truly are connected. We are all one. Yes. True Seeker says, totally, Dana. I was so sold. Right? Like, when I read that analogy in the book, I'm like, that's exactly what it is. It's that mirage. You know, I had described it before as like, it's like it's like being so thirsty and seeing a mirage and holding on to this empty cup, thinking, but there's water over there. But deep down, you know, that's not water, it's a mirage. But you're like, I'm hopeful that there's water, but that your brain is like, but there's no water. And you're like, but it might be. Like, it might not be a mirage. It might really be a puddle of water. And then there's all of that cognitive dissonance going on, right? And like that internal, like, mental anguish of, is it a mirage? Is it water? Is it a mirage? Is it water? It's not. It's a mirage. Oh, thank you. Elise says, hi, Dana. Your videos are required watching for many of my clients. You are such a gift and an angel. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I think, right? Elise says cognitive dissonance is now my new deal breaker. I hear you on that. I think the benefit of the live streams and of these kinds of videos is when it's the community. It's hearing the validation from other people and from a person, a person's perspective who's gone through it is so great. I'm a big fan. I always encourage people. To me, the magic is if a person can be in both, find therapy with a good therapist and be in a support group and use that support group to get that validation and that clarity. And then any little sort of like gold panning, right? They're kind of sifting through all the muck. And then when they come up with these gold nuggets and they're like, man, somebody said something the other day and it really resonated with me. And this is my little gold nugget for today, or this is the big one that I found this week. They can then take that and go do one-on-one stuff with a therapist who's familiar with this and do a deep dive. And I think that is awesome. Like that's where a lot of insight comes from. Let's see. Elise asks, when do you think a narcissist crosses over to be a sociopath? It seems that they are more than just narcissists. I think, well, I don't know. To me, it's really kind of shades of the same color. But I guess for me, the real, if I had to make a line in the sand, it would be where their behavior becomes like exploitative. Because there's narcissists out there that are frustrating with that inability to see how damaging their behavior is to other people. Like that, they have that blinding degree of selfishness that's just exhausting. And you feel like you're talking to a brick wall most of the time because they just don't get it and it's all about them. But when it really moves on to like that selfishness, it becomes exploitative and they're, using and abusing and when they become more active, I guess to me is more of that line, or it becomes more sociopathic. I would agree though. I think the vast majority of people the situations that we talk about and that people even tend to get into therapy about are probably more sociopathic. Narcissists, I would say sociopaths tend to leave a person feeling emotionally devastated because they tend to be very charming and they come across as prince or princess charming. Psychopaths tend to make a person feel a lot of like PTSD. And this is just kind of off the cuff, my own 2 cents about it all. Psychopaths, from what I've experienced, tend to leave a person feeling fearful and terrified and like they've met the devil. And just this, people will use words like dark energy. They weren't human, and they tend to feel that energy a lot sooner, like sinister, malicious intent. And then with narcissists, it's more of I'm confused, I'm frustrated. Why is it all about them? Why can't I get through to them? Kind of thing. But to me, it's just, it's shades of the same color, really. Yeah. Elise says, I see some women getting divorced, and a few of these narcissists are so vengeful. They want their children, they say, but then they hurt them. They are so crazy. Yeah. And really, I mean, at the core of all of it, right? At the core of antisocial personality disorder is narcissism. So like, while not all narcissists are antisocials, all antisocials are at the core narcissists. So it's that kind of those core traits of narcissism that are the problem. And it's that drive of dominance, of power and control, of winning at all costs, that the damage they do to preserve their ego it's just jaw dropping. The collateral damage to their children, to their families, to their friends, to their jobs, to themselves. It's true. It's winning at the expense of everybody, themselves included. Little Miss says, yeah, it's just, it's so gross. She says, yes, it's just shades of poop soup. Yes, it is. No more poop in our soup. Yeah, isn't that the truth? Truth Seeker says, mine hated me at first sight while love bombing me at hello. That's pretty much it. Yeah, Tammy says, I came across a malignant narcissist. There was confusion very early on, and very soon I felt as though I'd met the devil. Yeah. Yeah. It's, Call Me a Butterfly asks, yeah, shades. Yes, shades of the same color. Yeah, to me, it's toxic is toxic is toxic. And so for our purposes, I mean, if a person is, for our purposes, toxic is toxic is toxic. And since there's no treatment for any of it, like it really doesn't matter. Is it, it's sort of like drinking. It'd be different, right? So like if a person overdoses or ingests something, like a paramedic is going to need to know what the person took so they can give them an antidote. So, they can give Narcan if a person took certain medication or certain drugs. It's like opioids. But if a person took poison, generally the only solution to that is to get the person to throw up. So whether or not that's bleach, whether that or not that's, or they drink charcoal right away or as soon as possible. But so it's kind of the same thing. Like if a person ingests, it doesn't matter if it's strychnine or if it's arsenic or if it's bleach or what have you, toxic is toxic is toxic, and it's going to cause a lot of damage. Sunny says, my narcissist threatens suicide almost every weekend. I got to the point I don't care and I don't reply to his texts. Yeah, I would agree. You don't need to reply to that. To me, I view suicide threats as a person holding another person emotionally hostage. And it's sort of like saying, you better do what I say or I'm going to shoot. And I'm a big fan of, I don't negotiate with terrorists. Like I don't do that. So I think a good way to handle that is if you did want to do something, it would be to call 911. Call the emergency response team. They'll be the ones that'll handle it. And the added benefit is then that narcissist, that emotional manipulator realizes that that's not going to fly with you. That every time they do that, then you're going to call 911. And they learn real quick to not do that. That's a good one. Call Me a Butterfly says, how do you avoid narcissists at work? I've gotten into 2 narcissistic environments on jobs. I'm afraid of the next job situation. Yeah, I've had this happen a few times too. Really, I think like what's worked for me, like what I do now, is I just keep things professional at work. So I guess maybe asking yourself, is there a pattern? what tends to happen? Does it tend to follow that pattern of like it's a whirlwind situation? You think that they're kind of this, um, you've met a new friend and things kind of kick up, and then you start seeing that those personality shifts. Is that what's going on, or do they seem like they're a problem straight away? If it tends to be more of a, well, I guess with the first situation, if they seem really great and then they start running really hot and cold and they start, you find yourself having anxiety attacks and walking on eggshells and all that kind of stuff, then um, you know, keeping people at arm's length. It's the whole going slow. And I'm not a fan of, I think it's a bad idea to date somebody you work at. I think it's a bad idea to really become friends with people that you hang out with or that you work with. It's one thing to be like acquaintances and go to each other's, if you go to each other's kids' graduations and that kind of stuff, but to really open up to a person, especially, and it's the same. Like if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling unsafe around this person, if you're feeling like maybe you can't trust them, if you're feeling like something's off, to listen to that and realize, okay, I need to slow things way down and not let them set the pace of this. To instead, you set the pace of it, and that you, even if they're opening up to you and they're telling you all about their marriage problems or problems with their kids or whatever, that you don't have to reciprocate to that. Like you can still keep things polite and pleasant and professional. And a lot of times holding that boundary can really help to keep problematic people at bay. Okay, let me scroll down. Yeah, Patania says, I find narcissists everywhere, friends, coworkers. I just keep them at arm's length and utilize headphones when I'm working with them. Yeah, I think it's a good way to handle it. There's that kind of personality type, that conflict oriented personality type, the crazy makers. They're out there and many of them are gainfully employed. So, they have jobs and they work in a wide variety of fields. And so it's important for us to be able to spot this kind of behavior, not only in people that we're dating, but in every other area of our life. If you volunteer, if you go to church, if you have friends, if you kind of, no matter what you're doing, to see it for what this is. A lot of people, and I get it, I've been there too, they'll have kind of blinders on where their radar is only set to scan for people that they date, or only set to scan for like family members. And it's important that we really open that radar range up and have it set to scan everybody. And a lot of this, and that might sound like a lot of work and really overwhelming, but if you can get to that place where you know how something feels when something feels off, and that you can trust yourself to keep the zipper on the inside, that you control the speed of these things, you control how involved or uninvolved you're going to be, or how much distance you're going to give yourself, and that can help. Heather, thank you for the live stream donation. Yep, Truth Seeker says headphones are awesome. Keep your body moving forward. Yes, and so that's another point I want to touch on, is having a plan. So if you're going to see a crazy maker, okay, or just a difficult person, to plan ahead. I love the idea. Have headphones. Keep your phone on you. If you're in a meeting and you're like, oh my God, this person's going to be there, and I hope I hope this meeting starts soon. I don't want to have to engage in small talk and things are awkward and all this stuff. If you can have a plan, stay busy. Bring your phone so you can check your email, or you can do these things to kind of have an excuse. Or if you see them if you're walking into the building and they're in the parking lot, that you can pretend to be on your phone, or um, you're coming up with some responses ahead of time. So if they're a crazy maker, and if you're like me, yeah, where you have a hard time just making up stuff, to think about some stuff. So if they're like always, if they're like, hey, what are you going to do? Like, do you want to hang out this weekend? And you're like, and you find yourself being like, or if they say, hey, do you have any plans this weekend? And you can't think of a lie quick enough, and you're not comfortable saying that you don't want to spend time with them, you know, to think of something, these canned responses of, yes, I'm busy this weekend. Like, you don't have to lie, but like thinking up responses. I think a lot of people have a hard time knowing how to handle those kind of situations. So if you can think of responses ahead of time, when those situations do come up, you're not so knocked off balance. Yeah, you just, you stay busy. I had a gal, oh my God, at work who was going around. This is right before I quit my job. So thankfully, things kind of just ended when they all needed to end. She was making my life a living hell. And she knew I was doing this, the live streams, and wanting to do all of this full time. And I think it just really, it just triggered something within her. And she began going back through all of the charts, everything I've ever noted, and digging up every single one of my mistakes. And oh, it was odd. I was walking on eggshells. I was crying. I was having panic attacks. I'm like, I've got to get out of here. And is it me? Is it her? What's going on? But I knew that this was why she was doing this, because we had lunch, and I had mentioned I was working on a book and that I was really wanting to quit my job and do this full time. And she gave me this look of pure contempt. And I left there and I texted another friend. I'm like, oh my God, like I've never had anybody look at me like that before. And sure, that was like on a Saturday. Like that Monday, it was like a switch flipped, and she made my life a living hell at work. And this went on for weeks. And um, it was so great, because when I realized, I'm like, I think I just need to quit. Like, I think this is a lot sooner than when I wanted to quit, but I think I can't do this. Like, I can't. I promised myself I would never leave myself in a situation like this. And one of the last things I told her, because I felt like she was gearing up to try to get me fired. And finally I told her, I said, you know what? I really feel like if I'm making all of these and she was even like making up stuff that didn't even happen. Like gaslighting is what that was. Um, I said, I really feel like you should take all of these mistakes that I'm making and go to our boss and show her. And that shut her up real quick, because it was like, oh, she didn't expect me to say that. Because then all of a sudden she lost all the power about it. And she's like, well, I really feel like we need to discuss this. Like, just keep it between us. I mean, there's no need to bring the boss into it. And I was like, no, I think there is. Like, I really feel like she needs to know about it, because obviously this is a problem. And, you know, because then the reality is it would have made her look really petty. And like, why are you digging up old charts and finding out like things that I had copied down wrong, or, you know, like you're going on a witch hunt for like everything I've ever done wrong. And that's psycho. And she knows that that was psycho. So I think at work, those kinds of things, realizing what are they trying to do, and then kind of beat them to the punch about it. And sometimes it is the best solution is to quit, because that kind of stress is not worth it. Call Me a Butterfly says, yes, I have been there. I did quit a job over that. It was absolutely horrible. Yep. Yep. Kevin says, oh yeah, my abuser did that to me too, trying to cause a meltdown. Yeah. Yeah. And I struggled so much with that too, because this gal and we were friends outside of work. We'd spent a lot of time together. And when the good times were good, and they had been really good, well, for the most part, for quite a while. But there were it was funny because then I got used to dodging her bait, because I felt like she would try to bait me into these conversations. Like, for example, like she was listing her house for sale, and she would ask me a question about it. And then if I would give her my opinion, then she would flip that around and use that as a way to like insult me. Like, oh, well, I think the realtor knows best, kind of a thing. Like it was, oh, I don't know if I'm even accurately describing that. Like, or making comments about just her weight and how she needed to go to the gym because she really valued her body. Kind of the implication is that I didn't. Just stuff like that. And I know that it's not me, because there would be long periods of time where I didn't feel that she was being snarky, and then she would kind of start up again, and it would be the same kind of things. And so it really did. It kind of got to the point of I could see it coming, and then I could like dodge it out of the way. So like with the real estate stuff, she'd ask me a question. And instead of falling into it and giving my 2 cents, I would just say, well, you know what? I think you've got it covered. It sounds like you have a really great realtor. I'm sure that you guys will get it figured out. And I just would not feed into it, you know? And then she'd switch topics to something else to ask my opinion, and then use it as a way to be like, well, so-and-so who's smarter or more qualified or this or that said this. And it was just like, I'm done. Like, I'm done. Then don't ask my opinion. I'm not playing that game. Oh, crazy. No more crazy makers. No more. The interesting thing with this gal is I really don't know if she's aware that she does this. And it's so interesting from like that kind of a curiosity perspective, because I've so many crazy makers I've known before know exactly what they're doing, and they really get off on feeling smug and superior like this. But she would come into my office and talk to me about other situations, like with their family or what have you. And I could tell like she really just lacked insight. And I really kind of struggled with that because I quit working there and was just done. Like I blocked her number. She sent me a text, saying, oh, I felt like you've really pulled away and blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Like you've made my life a living hell for like a month at work. Like, no joke, lady. Like, of course we're not friends anymore. Like my friends don't treat me like this. And part of me really thought about that. Like maybe if I explain it to her, that she'll get it. And then I kind of realized she doesn't get it. Like she does this in other areas of her life and she doesn't see it. So she's not going to see it now. And I gotta go. I gotta go. Let's see. Let me scroll down. Yeah, Truth Seeker says, mine knew exactly what he was doing. He had a plan to get rid of me, start to finish. Yeah, they're all kind of just different. They're just different flavors of the same poison. They really are. I mean, I've met a couple. I've been involved with a couple who definitely had that malicious, sinister intent. I mean, that the one guy that really sparked me to do these videos in my blog, he had told me, this is another big red flag. Like he had told me about his ex-girlfriend who ended up being committed to a psychiatric hospital, and she wanted to kill herself. And she basically went stark raving mad and just went screaming down the street. And I remember thinking, oh, that's so weird. His story didn't add up. And then the more I was around him, the more I kind of realized, I think he not only drove her to that, I think he intentionally drove her to that. And I think that he really enjoys the power in destroying other people. It was very, dark dude and dark energy. And whereas the other men that I'd been involved with, I think they just intended to exploit me. But there wasn't, I don't think that they thought about like, I'm going to try to destroy her. It was like, I just plan on, I want my cake and I want to eat it too. And I'm just going to ride this train as long as I can and just get whatever I can from her, kind of a feeling. I don't know. They're all different. Like, they're all different. Oh, crazy. Crazy, crazy. So let's see. I keep forgetting they don't have this. Is it time? When did we start this? 8:30, right? 8:30 to 9:30, 9:30, 10:30, 10:30 to 11:30. Is that right? We're done at 11:30, and it's 11:11 right now. Okay, I'm lost. I'm lost without my timer. Oh gosh, Bonnie. Yeah, I've done that dance too. She says, my narcissist goes between silent treatment and rages. He makes sure that there are no witnesses around. Yep. I've lived that. And that's wild too, isn't it? When you experience something like that, where it's like, oh, it's just awful. Awful. Eggshells. Walking on eggshells. And it's the whole thing of, I'm giving you silent treatment if you question me, or I might rage at you if you disagree with me or question me, I guess. Oh, I love that. Missouri. Yeah, we can for sure do that. He says, can we send light and love to everyone in Mexico affected by the earthquakes? Yes, we sure can. I was just awful, isn't it? I tell you, I don't know what's going on with all the weather patterns in the world, but it's scary. I really hope that that's it for them, because they had an earthquake. What was it, like a week or two ago? So this is the second one, but this was the big one. And Bonnie says, yes, it's frightening how they can change on a dime, nice to others, but then turn into a raging psychopath when others leave. And he has me alone completely. Yeah, what's up with that? Postmodern says, then there's the hurricanes in the Caribbean. Are these the same hurricanes that were going on like before Irma? Because we kept hearing about them, and then all of a sudden we weren't hearing about them anymore. Heather asks, yeah, I have a friend that does that to me. I try to not take the bait. When do you finally call them on it? Oh, I don't know. It's hard. It depends. It depends. Because there's a very solid chance that they might not change. So I was talking earlier about this crazy maker I had in my life that I'd known for decades, and I really enjoyed his company up until things took a left turn and got crazy. And um, you know, I kept thinking, okay, I did begin calling him on it, you know, and but then he would kind of play stupid. Like, well, I didn't mean to do that. Let's talk about that. And he really seemed to come across as like concerned and solutions oriented. And so then I would explain like how I felt. And it's like trying to nail jello to a wall. It's just shifting and sliding and excuses and this and that. And then I would get more and more irritated and frustrated. And, it just like no solutions possible. It's just the conversation just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, I leave these conversations rehashing things and upset for days where I think of and thinking about how did things get so off track? How could I be more clear next time? How could I keep things on track? Why do things go this far south? Maybe it's the length of our conversations because we used to talk for hours. Maybe if we talked like less, then that would help. Or and then really what did it was he had the last time I talked to him, he had told me that he had a coworker who told him that he thought he was a narcissist. And then it was just because my radar was not set to scan for that. And it was just like, bingo, I agree with your coworker completely. So like it was just that was my wake up moment. And I saw it and I'm like, yep, that's exactly what it is. And then, of course, he wanted to argue that and then said, well, no, I've got this friend, who has a PhD in psychology, and he says that I'm not. So it's kind of that subtle, or I guess not so subtle, put down, right? And I was just at that point, I'm like, you know what? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what your PhD friend says. I know what I'm experiencing, and I don't do crazy making. So I'm done. Went no contact. I think you have to get the point of that is that you have to get clear on the resolution that you're seeking. So if a person's got this kind of crazy making behavior, then how many conversations are you going to have with it? How many times are you going to try to correct them and just be like, you're doing it again, and how much of that do you want in your life? And I think then you'll have your answer. But be prepared for all of it. It's all the games of denial on their end and justification. I didn't really mean that. You took that the wrong way. You're too sensitive. You're crazy. You've been reading too much about all this narcissism stuff. That's not what happened. Like blah, 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 blah. Exhausting. In the book Psychopath Free, he refers to them as conversations from hell. And I think that is a very accurate way to put that. If you find yourself engaged in conversations from hell, you got to get out of hell. Like that's the problem is the conversation. The problem is you're in hell and you got to get out. So start walking fast in the other direction. Yeah. Postmodern says really no contact is the solution. I agree. Oh, I like that. Truth Seeker says if you call a narcissist on their shit, that's what they want. It's fuel for their smear campaign or they fight delight. Yep. So, okay, with all that said, let's do our we're going to end tonight with doing a little kind of guided meditation. So if you're in a spot where you can get comfortable, go ahead and get comfortable. Okay, let me get comfortable myself here. My creaky chair. Okay. Oh, just get comfortable as much as you can. Just let that tension go. Okay, and take a deep breath in through your nose. And exhale out through your mouth. And inhale again through your nose. Focusing on filling up both the top lobes of your lungs and the bottom lobes of your lungs. How much oxygen can you get in? And exhale. Okay, and take another deep breath in through your nose. Filling up your lungs with that pure white light, that amazing oxygen. And exhaling slowly throughout your mouth. Let's do one more breath. In through your nose, filling up your lungs, filling them up with oxygen. You can feel them in the top part of your chest, and you can feel it in the bottom part of your chest too. And exhaling. You're just letting all of that stress and anxiety and tension go. Every exhale, just letting it go. Let your head relax. Let your neck relax. Like it's a piece of limp spaghetti. Feel the weight of your shoulders as they come down. Just let them go. Feel them drop down a couple inches. Just let them drop down. Feel the weight of your arms, your forearms, your hands. So heavy. Just let that weight go. Relax your torso. Let's breathe in again. So breathe in through your nose, filling up your lungs. And exhaling all of the stress and tension. And if you can, when you exhale, make it loud. really feel all of that stress and tension leaving your body. So let's practice that again. So let's breathe in through your nose. And exhale loudly. Emptying your body, all of that stress and tension. And relaxing your thighs and your hips and your knees, your legs, making sure they're uncrossed. You're just fully relaxed. And taking the time right now to just do a little check of your body. Is there any place that you notice that you're still storing tension? Everybody stores it in a different spot. Maybe it's in your neck. Maybe it's in your shoulders. Maybe it's in your jaw. Are you clenching your jaw? Try practicing relaxing your mouth. Let your tongue fall away from the roof of your mouth. Do you feel the difference? Just relaxing your jaw. You might even want to just let it fall open. Just relax. Notice any area in your body that you're holding tension. Is it in your stomach, your lower back, your knees? Are you feeling pain anywhere? Let's take a deep breath in and send that breath to that area that you're holding the tension or the pain. So we're going to breathe in through your nose, send the breath to that area, and then when you exhale, exhale all of the tension and pain out from that area, okay? So take a deep breath in, sending that breath to that area. And exhale out all of the tension, pain, and stress from that area. Let's do that one more time. Take a deep healing breath in, sending that breath to that specific area that you're holding tension or pain. And exhaling and releasing all of the tension and pain. Your body is relaxed. Now envision a healing light. Maybe that light is a color. Maybe it's soft. Maybe it's white. Maybe it's purple or green or pink or blue. But it's healing. And visualize that filling your body with healing energy. Visualize that light is joy, it's love, it's healing, it's on your side, it's for you, it's sent specifically for you, and it's swirling through your body, and it's having so much fun. It's swirling and dancing and spinning, and it's just kissing every cell that it touches of your body, giving you vibrance and energy and healing, letting you know that you matter. And feel that light, that freedom, that fun, that bliss as it just swirls throughout your body, down your arms, down your legs. You might even start feeling your hands tingling. Energy swirling around. Visualize it coming out of your fingertips and out of your toes and out of the top of your head. It's just all around you. Swirling around you. I want you to imagine the bottom of your feet, that energy going about 12 to 18 inches below your feet, going deep into the earth, like deep roots connecting you to this universal energy. Can you feel it? Feel the energy moving through your feet, a few feet down into the earth, as if you were a tree and you're growing roots. And this is you grounding yourself in all that is good and all that is healing. You're solid. You're deeply connected. And knowing that right now you have the strength, and you have the wisdom, and you have the insight. It's always been inside of you, but now you know you're more in tune with it, and you know how to use these gifts. And you are so strong. You are so strong, and you're grounded. And whenever you start feeling stressed in your day-to-day life, realize that this energy is always with you, and it always connects you. And all you need to do to tap into it is to be still and let it flow out from your feet and into the earth. Feel it as it goes deeper and deeper. 4 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches, down into the earth like you're a tree. You are connected. And now that you're feeling so grounded and so full of positivity and love and radiance, you know that you have enough of that energy to now share it with other people who could use some. So let's take some time and send that energy out to other people that you think need some of that healing energy, to friends, to family, to total strangers, to people recovering from the hurricanes, from Harvey, from Irma, from the earthquake. And imagine yourself giving them an energetic hug and passing along some of that healing energy. And thinking about any animals out there that you love, or even that you may not even know, that you want to send healing light and love to. And when you're ready, come back. And don't forget to give yourself an energetic hug too. You've been through a lot, and you're going to come out on the other side of this. When you're ready, open your eyes and rejoin us here. Oh, I love that. Hi, Doug. Doug says, love and light. Thank you. Thank you for the live stream donation. Always so thoughtful of you, and always enjoy seeing you so much. So, with that said, thank you guys so much for your time and for your questions and for supporting each other and for being yourself and for all of it, for all of it. So take care. I will see you next week. So lots of love to you guys always. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal. So I'll see you soon. Bye.